Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, guys, based on the time zones you all are coming from. So, guys, before we start with the session, can you all please give me a quick confirmation if you all can see my screen and hear me loud and clear as well? Perfect. Thank you so much for the confirmation, everyone. So, before we get started, let me quickly introduce myself to you all first. So, my name is Neeraj Keria, and I have been working in this IT industry for more than 13 years now. So today we have gathered for our discussion on Agile Scrum Framework. So let's get started on it. So the main agenda for today's session, we are going to talk about what exactly we mean by Scrum and what exactly is Scrum Framework, what do we mean by sprint, what are Scrum Ceremonies, and then we are going to conclude the session by discussing the use cases as a part of our discussion. If we talk about Scrum, now to understand the importance of Scrum, we have to first of all take a look at a more traditional alternative that we have by the name of we can say Waterfall Model. So if we talk about Waterfall Model, then all the planning happens at the beginning of the development process, and a good amount of time is invested in the same. Then complete development of the product takes place, followed by testing, then finally, a product is reviewed and deployed, the whole of which requires about a year. Now, the problem, as you can see here, we have a complete sequential step that needs to be followed, starting from planning to building to testing, review, and the deployment phase. So now the problem with waterfall is that such an approach is that the planning happens completely ignorant of the possible challenges that might be faced by the team during the development. This may lead to a lot of backstabbing and delays. Also, at the end of the long cycle, we might just realize that the requirement of the market has completely changed and our product no longer meets its requirements. So this brings us back to square one. So the solution is offered in the format of Scrum. So in Scrum, we have the following approach. First of all, we have to plan, which is basically just enough to get started with our project. Second, we have to build our product with a minimum basic set of features that we also refer as minimum viable product. And then third, we test those features according to the plan. So if they align to the requirements or not, and then at last we conduct a review to demonstrate that said product to the stakeholders for the acceptance. And what you have here is potentially a shippable product. So these four steps comprise of one iteration, which is repeated time and time again, reducing the time taken for each incremental release or version of the product. So what exactly is Scrum if we talk about? So Scrum implements the agile methodology for building a potentially shippable software through processes, techniques, and practices with iterations and increments to deliver maximum value. And Scrum is basically not exactly a methodology. It is a simple, lightweight framework for effective team collaboration on complex products. So as even as per the definition, and Scrum is a framework within which people can address complex adaptive problems while productively and creatively delivering products of the highest possible value. And Scrum promotes developing products through processes, techniques, and practices with iterations and increments to deliver maximum value that we have discussed. So we have multiple iterations, and then we can make sure that we are iterating the product until as we have a final version available with us. So that's how we can work in multiple iterations. And that exactly is what Scrum is, to find the iteration with the maximum possible value. And these iterations, they are itself called as sprints. And at the end of each sprint, we have a launch of a potentially deliverable software. And Scrum follows the agile approach to tackle common, or we can say common or complex issues. So now if we talk about the roles in Scrum, again, we have the product, then we have Scrum Master, and then we have a team working on it. So these are the people again in Scrum. All right, so first of all, if we talk about Scrum, like here we may have multiple problems when you're working. For example, the first problem may be now they suppose they are a number of people in a room and they have to queue up according to their respective heights, taking a minimum amount of time possible. So now there can be two ways to approach this problem. We have a room full of people who needs to be sorted, right? The first solution can be the supervisor approach. Now, this approach involves one person taking up the responsibility of organizing others. So here can be one person who will be dictating how things have to be arranged. So the person is going to be responsible for organizing the others into the queue. And this method, however, takes up too much time and leaves no room for people to think for themselves because they are simply going to follow the orders. That's it, right? So here, although we have, let's say here we have a dozen minds, but again, but only one mind is set on work. The other minds are not working at all, correct? That's why we have, again, this setup requires more amount of time. And then the second approach is following the Scrum Master approach. So here we have seen how we can, now the first one is going to work on the direction part, and that's how each and every people in that room, they are going to be queued according to the height. So this is a supervisor approach. So in order to optimize this approach, optimize the solution, and to reduce the time, we can take the help of Scrum Master approach, or we can say the Agile approach. So the Agile approach is, suppose say maybe we have multiple people in the room. Now, the Scrum Master allows a team of to self-organize and makes changes quickly. So first of all, we can guide them how things need to be done, and then they are going to arrange themselves accordingly. And if there are any changes required, then we are going to guide them on those changes as well. So the Scrum Master facilitates agile principles, and the Scrum Master manages the process for how information is exchanged. And this consumes less time, and the team grows by learning to think for themselves. That exactly is the approach followed by Scrum. And that exactly is what Scrum is all about. So again, the team is going to simply do the task for us, and we are going to perform a simple supervision. So Agile is basically a set of practice that promotes continuous iteration of development and testing throughout the software development lifecycle that we commonly abbreviate as SDLC of the project. It promotes self-organization and assists teams in responding to the unpredictability of the problem in hand. And the Scrum Master allows a team to self-organize and make changes quickly. He or she facilitates the agile principles, and the Scrum Master manages the process of how information is going to be exchanged. Now, the Scrum Master, now there are some myths that needs to be busted. Scrum Master is not a supervisor. Scrum Master is there to make sure that the process of the agile process is followed. The Scrum Master is not a secretary to get the job done for others. Self-organization does not mean the absence of management. Scrum Master is there to see how things are doing, how things are being done as a part of this approach. Now, next we have the Scrum Framework. So Scrum isn't a methodology, it stands upon the scientific method of empiricism. So it basically replaces the programmed algorithmic approach with a more heuristic, or we can say self-learning approach with respect for people and self-organization to deal with the unpredictable nature of the impediments in software development. So if you talk about the word empiricism, then again, empiricism is nothing but working in a fact-based, experience-based, and evidence-based manner. So an empirical process is one where progress is based on observation of reality, not fictitious plans. So empiricism stands on three pillars. We have transparency, inspection, and adaptation. And we can see here we have a complete step process. So the first thing is we have to take input from stakeholders. Then we have the product owner, the product backlog is created. Then the sprint planning meeting happens. And then we create the sprint backlog for each and every individual features. Then we work on performing daily Scrum, including Scrum Master. Then we get the finished product, and then we simply work on sprint retrospective. So again, it is all a complete step process, and then we have to, and then how exactly it works, we are going to discuss about each and every pointer step by step. So the Scrum implements the scientific method of empiricism that we had discussed just now. It replaces a programmed algorithmic approach with a heuristic one, with respect for people and self-organization to deal with unpredictability and solving complex issues. Then there are three pillars of empiricism that we had discussed. First of all, we have transparency, then we have inspection, and then we have adaptation. So basically, empiricism that we discuss is based on a fact-based and experience-based and evidence-based manner. That's how it is going to be structured for. And there are three different pillars available here. First of all, we have transparency. So if you talk about transparency, it means presenting the facts as it is, and all people involved, that is the consumer, the CEO, individual contributors, they all are transparent in their day-to-day dealing with others. Then we have inspection. So now inspection should be done for the product, processes, people, aspects, and practices and continuous improvements by each member on the Scrum team. And then we have adaptation. So basically adaptation refers to the ability to adapt based on the results of the inspection. So this term in this context is about continuous improvement. That exactly is what adaptation here is. So first of all, let's start with a discussion on Scrum lifecycle so that whatever your query is, again, they all are going to be addressed once we start discussing on these parameters one by one. So first of all, in Scrum lifecycle, we have product backlog. And then we have release backlog, then we have sprint backlog, backlog items, and then we have demo of a potential release. And then we perform the retrospective again, and that's why the backlog items and the demo of potential release is basically a continuous sprint process. So then comes down the user stories. Now the first process starts with the product owner itself. Now this person creates the product backlog, a priority list of tasks, and the requirements to final product needs. That is a responsibility for product owner. Then step two is a team together. The team gets together for the sprint planning and decides together what to work on first from the product backlog which is going to be created by the product owner. Then in step three, now during the sprint, the team meets daily to communicate the progress and issues. The meeting is called as daily Scrum. The meeting there is called as daily Scrum. And then we have, so we can understand this better by referring to this diagram. Like we have this one. So during the sprint, the team meets daily to communicate the progress and issues. And this meeting is called as daily Scrum. And the Scrum Master oversees it and ensures that all the team members follow Scrum theories, rules, and practices by the guidelines of Scrum Master. And at the end of each sprint, a sprint review meeting is organized by the product owner. And during the meeting, the development team demonstrates the work done in the last sprint. And then the product owner discusses the remaining product backlog and estimated time to complete the project if needed. Now, in some Scrum, at the end of each sprint, the team should have a functioning, usable piece of the product to show for their work. And after the review, Scrum team together, again, they simply gathers up together in sprint retrospective meeting where the team discusses what went well, what did not went well, and if they have any challenges and how things could have been improvised. So it could be a tech limitation that is holding them back, or it may be a team member who is overloaded with tasks. The team decides how to fix these problems and plans for improvement to be enacted during the next sprint. And then the cycle repeats itself for the tasks remaining in the product backlog. And this goes on until either the deadline is reached or the budget has been exhausted, or also the if the product owner is satisfied, which we know is a complete myth, though client in the entire world is 100% satisfied with the said product. All right, so let's move further. Now, let's talk about sprint. So a sprint is basically an iteration in the Scrum. So it is time boxed at 1 month and results in the creation of a usable, releasable product. And a new sprint starts immediately after the conclusion of the previous one. All right. So basically, during the course of the sprint, no changes are going to be made that is going to endanger the sprint goal. So we don't allow any kind of, we can say, goal change or any kind of objective changes. And the quality of the increment does not decrease. And the scope of the project may be renegotiated between the product owner and the team. And each sprint has a goal that is called as a sprint of a goal, which of what is built, and it is a design blueprint or a flexible plan that is going to guide the building, that is going to guide the team building the resultant product increment as a part of sprint. Now, there are multiple factors that affect the duration of a sprint, like we have discussed. Again, here we have the stability of the backlog. That means there should not be more frequent changes. The cost again should be put in check as a part of keeping the duration of sprint aligned to the requirement, to the goal. Then we have multiple sprint terminologies that we have to work on, that we have to know what before we proceed further. Like we have sprint goal, and once the sprint duration is definite and user stories are selected, neither can be altered, like sprint goal and sprint cancellation. So basically here, when we know, okay, what exactly has been the requirement and that has been set, because if we change that, then that is going to hamper the entire process. Because again, if we change the requirement, again, if we make any changes in even in the backlog, the entire development process is going to suffer, and that's why we don't do that. Then we have Scrum Artifacts. So Scrum's artifact represent work to provide transparency and opportunities for inspection and adaptation. So they are specifically designed to maximize transparency of key information. Hence, everybody in the Scrum team has the same understanding of the artifact. And there are mainly 3 artifacts in Scrum that we have. Namely, we have product backlog, then we have sprint backlog, and then we have increment. These are main 3 artifacts available under Scrum. If we talk about the first one, that by the name of product backlog, then the product backlog is an ordered list of everything required in the product. So this is basically a responsibility of the product owner. A product backlog is never complete. Initially, it contains the best understood requirements and evolves gradually with the development of the product and its environment, making it appropriate and relevant to the current market requirements. And then we have sprint. And now basically user stories are features, functions, or requirements that are delivered value to the customers. Now, next we have sprint backlog. So the product backlog, we have discussed already. So the sprint backlog is basically a set of product backlogs item selected for the sprint with a plan for delivering the next increment. It is a forecast by the development team explaining the desired functionalities in the next increment, and the work needs to deliver the same. And that is what we mean by sprint backlog here. As described in Scrum Guide, it's an increment in basically based on the sum of all the product backlogs item and during the sprint and previous sprints, and at the end of each sprint a new increment must be done, as we discussed. So an increment is what? An increment is basically a sum of all the product backlog items completed during a sprint, and again at the end of each and every increment the Scrum team's definition is considered to be done. All right. Next, we have Scrum ceremonies. So there are 4 ceremonies, events, or we can say events in Scrum. First of all, we have sprint planning. So the work that needs to be performed in sprint is planned at the sprint planning. It is planned out by the collaborative work of the entire Scrum team. So the time box for sprint planning is a maximum of 8 hours for 1 month sprint. And we can ask multiple questions in the sprint planning, such as what can be delivered in the upcoming increment and how will the work required for the sprint be achieved, right? So these are things that we define as a part of Scrum planning. And when is the work considered to be done, as in when the work is going to be considered as completed. Then we have daily Scrum. So the daily Scrum is a 15-minute time box event for the Scrum team to plan and synchronize activities for the next 24 hours. It is held every day of the sprint. So in the daily Scrum, each member has to answer the following questions. Things did I do yesterday? What I am going to do today? What are my impediments? So it is the Scrum Master's job to minimize impediments in the team's work to keep the sprint time box. And then we have sprint review. So the sprint review is an informal gathering, or we can say meeting, where the Scrum team and stakeholders, they all collaborate together about what was done in the sprint, and based on any changes to the product backlog and during the sprint, they plan on the next things that can be done to optimize value. For example, again, they are going to inspect the increment. It is timed as 1 hour a week, not more than that. And they will discuss what exactly has been done and what are the challenges faced by the team in getting those small goals completed. And then we have sprint retrospective. So the sprint retrospective occurs after the sprint review and prior to the upcoming sprint planning meetings. So this is boxed at 3 hours for 1 month, not more than that. That's a limitation. And during the sprint retrospective, the team discusses multiple questions. That means what exactly went well, what didn't work well, and what should be done differently to optimize the current setup, so that we can improvise the output both in terms of quality and in terms of time process. All right, so if you talk about roles in Scrum, then basically there are three distinct roles defined in Scrum. We have product owner, we have product owner, then we had discussed about Scrum Master, and then we had talked about the development team. So these three are the main roles get defined in Scrum. So if you talk about the product owner, then product owner is responsible for the work of the team, the work the team is going to perform. So the main role of a product owner is to motivate the team to achieve the goal and the vision of the project. So roles, if we talk about the roles and responsibilities of product owner, then it involves managing the product backlog and making sure that it is visible, transparent, and clear. And it also involves guiding the team to achieve the best goals and missions. It also includes making sure that the work is progressing in the right direction, and the product owner is going to be responsible for making rational decisions as well. And then the owner is also responsible for collaborating with the development team and stakeholders. And the product owner is going to be responsible for team management, for managing team economies, and actively participating in meetings as well. Then we had discussed about Scrum Master already. So Scrum Master is going to make sure that the goals and scopes of the project are well understood by each and every team member who is going to be involved in the project. And then we have to remove all the impediments, like we have to remove all the challenges and obstacles that could slow down the team's progress. Then we have to guide the team and product owner to improvise the effectiveness of their best practices and make sure that change. Now we are going to increase the productivity of the Scrum team by making required changes. And then we have to facilitate the Scrum events when requested and needed. And then we have to help stakeholders and employees understand Scrum empirical theory as well. And then we have the development team. So the development team is basically a self-organizing and cross-functional team working together to deliver products. And Scrum development teams are given the freedom to organize themselves and manage their own work to maximize the team's effectiveness and efficiency. So basically, if we talk about roles and responsibilities for any development team, then they have to plan the sprint with the guidelines from the product owner and Scrum Master, because the implementation part is going to be on them. And then they have to perform sprint execution and adapt the sprint according to the changing user requirements. And then we have to help both the product owners groom the product backlog, and then we have to, being it in the development team, we have to work on inspection and adaptation of the product and process. So these are the guidelines for, these are the roles available in Scrum. Now, if we have to conclude, then so far we have covered what exactly is Scrum, why don't we use the waterfall model. Then we have discussed on Scrum, what exactly it is, what exactly is Agile. Then we had covered on who itself is a Scrum Master. Then we have covered on the concepts of Scrum Framework. What is a Scrum Framework? What do we mean by empiricism? Then we had talked about the life cycle of Scrum. And then we had discussed on the concept for sprint, what exactly it is, and what are the factors that affect sprint, what are the sprint artifacts available. And then we have discussed on the concept of Scrum Ceremonies, where we have discussed on sprint planning, what is a daily Scrum, what do we mean by sprint review, and what is sprint retrospective. So thank you so much for joining, guys, and have a great day ahead. Take care. Bye-bye.